All right, so today we're diving deep into OneBalance. It's this new framework for managing your crypto across all kinds of different blockchains. It promises to make Web3 so much easier to use. Think like one unified balance no matter what chain you're on. You can pay gas fees with any token you want, and transactions happen almost instantly. Sounds pretty good, right?
It does sound pretty ambitious.
Well, we've been digging through their website, some articles, even their technical documentation, to get a better understanding of what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's tackling a very real problem in the crypto world.
Okay, so what is the problem that OneBalance is trying to solve?
Well, right now, Web3 is kind of a mess. It's like a city with all these different neighborhoods, but the roads between them are terrible.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So if you want to move your crypto from one chain to another, say you have some USDC on Solana and you want to buy an NFT on Base, it's a whole ordeal. You have to bridge tokens, swap them, wait for confirmations. It can take forever.
Ugh. Yeah, it's like trying to get across town during rush hour, but worse. So how does OneBalance make this easier?
Well, their big idea is something they call credible accounts.
Credible accounts. Okay, tell me more.
So, with a credible account, you're basically making a commitment. It's like putting down a deposit that says, hey, I'm serious about this transaction. And that allows things to move much faster because you don't have to wait for everyone on the blockchain to agree on everything.
So it's like a way to bypass all that blockchain traffic.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key part of the system, resource locks.
Resource locks.
Basically, you lock up some of your tokens as collateral to show you're good for it. This gives everyone confidence that the transaction will go through, and it prevents people from trying to game the system.
So it's like putting money in escrow.
Right. And that leads to faster transaction speeds and more security.
Okay, so we've got credible accounts and resource locks. What else is going on behind the scenes?
Well, there are these things called solvers.
Solvers, what do they do?
Solvers are like the couriers who actually move your tokens from one chain to another. They see that you've put up a resource lock, so they know they're not going to get stiffed, and they're incentivized to execute the transaction as quickly as possible.
So they're kind of like the Uber drivers of the crypto world.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Okay, so we've got credible accounts, resource locks, and solvers. This is starting to sound like a well-oiled machine.
And there's more. OneBalance also has something called a permissions engine.
A permissions engine, what's that all about?
It gives you more control over how your tokens are used. Imagine being able to set limits on how much an app can spend or trade on your behalf.
So it's like putting your crypto on a leash.
Yeah, exactly. You can give it some freedom, but within certain boundaries.
Like that.
You could tell a trading app, for example, hey, you can manage my portfolio, but only make trades between these price ranges.
Oh, that would be amazing. No more worrying about an app going rogue and wiping out your savings.
Right. You're always in control.
Okay, so we've got the credible accounts, the resource locks, the solvers, and the permissions engine. What else is part of this system?
You also have Oracle providers and data providers.
What do they do?
The Oracle providers basically verify that transactions have happened correctly. They're like the referees of the system. And the data providers gather all the relevant information from different blockchains so you can see everything in one place.
So it's like a whole team working together to make this happen.
That's right. It's a pretty sophisticated setup.
This is all very impressive, but what does it actually mean for me as a user? What are the concrete benefits?
Well, for one, you can see all your balances across all your chains in one place.
No more jumping between wallets. That would be a huge time saver.
And they're aiming to let you pay gas fees with any token you want.
Now that's a game changer.
Plus, transactions should happen almost instantly thanks to those pre-confirmations we talked about.
Okay, this is starting to sound very slick.
And they're also working on simplifying logins with things like passkeys and biometrics.
So you get security and convenience.
Exactly.
But is there anything in the material about how this would work in the real world?
They give an example of how it could streamline complex trades. Imagine using a platform like VOOI to execute a leveraged trade across multiple blockchains. With OneBalance, the whole thing could happen seamlessly in the background.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It really seems like they're trying to bring that Web 2 level of user-friendliness to the world of Web 3.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but I'll admit I'm still a bit fuzzy on the technical details. What exactly is this credible commitment machine I keep seeing mentioned?
Oh yeah, the CCM. It's basically the brains of the operation. It's a secure computer that ensures all those resource locks are issued correctly, transactions are validated, and everything runs smoothly.
So it's like the central bank of this whole system, but without actually holding anyone's funds.
Exactly. And that's a key point. OneBalance is designed to be non-custodial, which means you always have control over your own keys and assets.
That's good to hear. But when you say secure computer, where is this thing located?
Well, OneBalance is actually flexible in terms of how they implement the CCM. It could be something called a trusted execution environment, which is like a super secure vault inside a regular computer.
Hmm, interesting.
Or they could use multi-party computation, where the computation is split up between multiple parties, so no one person has all the keys to the kingdom.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
That's right.
And they mentioned using session keys for signing transactions, which I assume is another layer of security.
You got it. Session keys are temporary keys that are only used for a specific transaction and then disappear. This makes it much harder for hackers to compromise your main private keys.
Okay, that sounds pretty secure. So it seems like they've really thought through the security aspects. But are they trying to do all of this alone, or do they have partners?
Oh, they're definitely not alone. They've teamed up with some major players in the Web3 space, like Consensus, the team behind MetaMask.
Wow, MetaMask. That's huge. Almost everyone in crypto uses MetaMask.
Right. And they're also working with OpenSea, the big NFT marketplace, and Wintermute, a major player in decentralized finance.
Okay, so they've got some serious backing.
And then there's this whole Fellowship of the OneBalance thing. It's a group of organizations and individuals who all believe in their vision of a more user-friendly and chain-agnostic Web3.
A fellowship. That sounds pretty cool.
It's like they're building a movement.
Okay, so they've got a big vision, some promising technology, and some strong partnerships. But this all feels very new. Is there any timeline for when this is all going to launch?
It seems like they're taking a phased approach, which makes sense given how ambitious this is.
Mhm.
Their roadmap mentions starting with a whitelist for account creation in Q2 of 2024. Then they'll do some beta integrations with partners and eventually a full public launch.
So it's still early days, but they're moving forward. While we're talking tech, I'm still curious about those session keys and the credible commitment machine. Can we dive a little deeper into those?
Sure, when it comes to session keys, OneBalance is working with a company called Turnkey.
Turnkey.
Yeah, they specialize in building secure wallet infrastructure.
Okay, so what's Turnkey's role exactly?
OneBalance uses Turnkey's trusted execution environments to store the session keys.
Ah, those super secure vaults we were talking about.
Exactly. So even if someone manages to hack into the main system, the session keys are still protected.
That's smart. They're using existing security measures to make their system even more secure.
Right.
But I'm still curious about the inner workings of that credible commitment machine. What makes it so credible?
Well, it's the ultimate guarantor in the system. It makes sure that resource locks are issued and validated correctly. It monitors all the state changes happening across the different blockchains. And it basically acts as the traffic cop to prevent any double spending or other shenanigans.
So it's like the bedrock of the whole system, making sure everything runs smoothly and honestly.
Exactly. It's a
The-
foundation of trust.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned earlier that OneBalance is compatible with both EOAs and SDAs. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. EOAs are externally owned accounts, the standard accounts we use in most crypto wallets today. They rely on private keys.
Okay.
SCAs are smart contract accounts, which are more complex and programmable.
So one is simple and one is more advanced.
Yeah, you could say that.
But why is it important that OneBalance works with both?
It's all about flexibility and adoption. By supporting both types of accounts, OneBalance can easily integrate with the current Web3 landscape. People don't have to switch wallets or create new accounts to use it.
That makes sense. It lowers the barrier to entry.
Right.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the problems OneBalance is trying to solve to the technical details of their solution and even their plans for the future. What stands out to you as the most significant part of this whole thing?
You know, what really fascinates me is the shift from a chain-centric to an account-centric view of Web3. Instead of being limited by the constraints of each individual blockchain, OneBalance puts the user at the center of the experience.
It's almost like they're building an operating system for the multi-chain world.
That's a great way to put it. And it has the potential to change the power dynamics of the whole Web3 ecosystem.
Okay, now that's an interesting thought. So it's not just about making things easier for users, it's about fundamentally changing how we interact with blockchains.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift.
But they're not stopping there, are they? They mentioned things like resource lock sequencers and a more in-depth look at the permissions engine.
Yeah, those are some deeper dives into the tech for sure.
So what are these resource lock sequencers?
They're the ones managing those commitment promises. We talked about the resource locks. They make sure the funds are properly locked up and released only when the agreed upon conditions are met.
Ah, okay, so they're like the enforcers.
You could say that.
And what about the permissions engine? What more can you tell me about that?
It's really all about giving you, the user, fine-grained control over how your assets are used. You can set up rules and conditions for different apps, so they can only access what you allow them to and only under specific circumstances.
So it's like setting up a personalized security system for your crypto where you define the rules of engagement.
That's a great way to think about it.
This is really starting to blow my mind. It feels like the next step in the evolution of Web3.
It definitely has the potential to be a big leap forward.
But we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this OneBalance thing. We need to delve deeper into their roadmap, those different types of credible commitment machines, and how all this fits into the bigger picture of Web3 adoption.
There's definitely a lot more to unpack, that's for sure.
Exactly. So join us for part 2 of this deep dive into OneBalance, where we'll continue to explore this groundbreaking technology and its potential to reshape the entire Web3 landscape.
It's going to be a wild ride.
I can't wait. All right, so we're back and ready to keep digging into this OneBalance thing. Last time we left off talking about those resource lock sequencers. Can you remind me again what those do?
Oh, yeah, they're like the traffic cops of the system. They make sure all the resource locks, those commitment promises, are being handled properly.
Right.
They make sure the funds are locked up when they're supposed to be and then released, but only when all the conditions are met.
So they're preventing any shenanigans, keeping everything running smoothly.
Exactly. Think of them as like the guardians of trust in the system.
Got it. Okay. Now, I remember you mentioned there are different ways to build these sequencers, right? Like using either trusted execution environments or multi-party computation. To be honest, I still don't really understand what those are.
Yeah, those terms can be a bit jargony. So a T, a trusted execution environment, is like a high-security vault inside a computer. It's this isolated area where code can run, but nobody can mess with it. Think of it like Fort Knox for your crypto transactions.
Okay, Fort Knox, that makes sense. What about this multi-party computation?
MPC, it's like, imagine you have a secret recipe, but you don't want any one person to know the whole thing. You could split the recipe up, give each person only a part of it. That's kind of what MPC does. It spreads out the computation across a bunch of different parties, so no one person has all the power.
So it's like distributing the risk.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
So how does OneBalance choose which approach to use, T's or MPC, for a particular sequencer?
Well, it kind of depends. T's, they're faster and simpler to set up, but you're relying on the company that made the hardware to be trustworthy.
Makes sense.
MPC, on the other hand, is more complex to set up, but it's more decentralized, which aligns with the whole philosophy of Web3.
Right, right. So it's a trade-off between speed and security, finding the right balance.
Exactly.
Okay, now shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about OneBalance's mission. They're really aiming to make a big splash in Web3, change how things are done. How are they going about doing that?
Well, they've got this whole Fellowship of the OneBalance thing going on. They're trying to build a real community around this tech.
Yeah, it seems like they're putting a lot of effort into that.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got some pretty impressive partners already.
Oh, yeah, for sure. MetaMask, OpenSea, Wintermute, those are some big names in the crypto world.
I mean, MetaMask alone, that's huge.
Right. Almost everyone uses MetaMask.
So what do you think? Could this actually, go mainstream?
I mean, imagine if MetaMask just integrated OneBalance's credible accounts directly into their wallet. Suddenly, millions of people would have access to this seamless multi-chain experience.
That would be amazing. And think about what that could do for OpenSea.
Oh, yeah. The NFT market could explode.
It would remove so much friction.
Right, making it easier for people to buy and sell NFTs.
This is exciting stuff, but it all feels very, I don't know, futuristic.
Yeah, it's definitely early days.
Speaking of which, what's the timeline here? When can we expect to see this stuff actually launch?
Well, their roadmap outlines a multi-stage rollout for their platform called the One Product Suite. They're starting with a whitelist for account creation in Q2 of next year. Then they'll move to beta testing with partners, and finally, a full public launch.
So a slow and steady approach.
Yeah, this makes sense, right?
I mean,
Especially when you're dealing with people's money.
definitely. Better safe than sorry. Something we talked about before that I wanted to touch on again, you said OneBalance accounts are non-custodial, and I'm not sure I fully grasped what that means.
Oh, sure. Non-custodial means that you, the user, hold your own private keys. OneBalance never has access to your funds. It's like having your own personal crypto vault.
Oh, okay, so it's the opposite of what we see with some of those centralized exchanges where they hold your keys and you have to trust them to keep your funds safe.
Right, exactly. And that can be risky. With a non-custodial setup, you're in complete control.
So more power to the people.
Exactly. It's the whole spirit of decentralization.
But how can they be non-custodial and still offer all these fancy features like the resource locks and the permissions engine?
It's all about clever cryptography and smart contract design. They figured out how to facilitate all these interactions without ever actually needing to hold your private keys.
That's pretty impressive.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Okay, so it's like a super secure intermediary.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now, something else you mentioned before that I wanted to circle back to, this idea of shifting from a chain-centric to an account-centric view of Web3.
Oh.
Can you explain that a bit more?
So right now, the way most people use Web3, it's very tied to individual blockchains. Like if you want to use a dApp on Ethereum, you need ETH. If you want to use a dApp on Solana, you need SOL. It's all
Yeah.
very fragmented.
It's like having to carry different currencies for every country you visit.
Exactly. And that's what OneBalance wants to change. They want to focus on the user and their account, not the specific blockchain.
So imagine a world where you could move your assets and use dApps across any blockchain without having to worry about what token you need.
That's the vision.
It sounds like a dream.
But it would also have huge implications for the power dynamics of the crypto world.
How so?
Right now, certain blockchains have a lot of control, but in an account-centric world, that power shifts to the users.
That's a really interesting point. So it's not just about convenience, it's about a fundamental shift in how the system works.
Exactly. And that's what makes OneBalance so intriguing to me. They're not just tinkering around the edges, they're trying to reimagine the whole Web3 experience.
This is getting me really pumped up about this. But let's be realistic for a second. There have to be some challenges.
Oh, of course. For one, scalability. Can they handle millions, billions of users?
Right, that's a good point. And what about keeping up with all the new blockchains that keep popping up?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's where their collaborative approach and the fellowship come in. By working with all these different partners, they're hoping to make OneBalance as adaptable as possible.
So they're not trying to go it alone.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're aware of the challenges and they're taking steps to address them. That's good to hear. We've covered a lot of ground here, but it feels like we're just getting started.
Yeah, there's still a lot more to explore.
So what's next on our OneBalance journey?
Well, there's this whole rage quitting thing they talk about, which is their way of making sure you can always get your assets back, no matter what.
Rage quitting. That sounds intense.
It's a powerful feature.
And we need to take a closer look at the permissions engine and all the possibilities it opens up. Like how it can be used to create a truly personalized and secure Web3 experience.
Definitely.
I'm ready for more.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our OneBalance deep dive. Last time we were talking about all the potential this thing has. But you also mentioned this rage quitting thing. What is that all about? It sounds kind of dramatic.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful feature, but it's there to give users peace of mind. Basically, it guarantees that you can always withdraw your assets from the system,
No matter what.
no matter what.
So even if OneBalance were to, disappear overnight, I could still get my crypto back.
Exactly. You can initiate a rage quit at any time and recover your assets. You don't have to rely on any third party or wait for anyone's approval.
So it's like an emergency exit button for your crypto.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, I see why they call it rage quitting. But how does it actually work, technically?
It's all built into the smart contracts. You basically send a special transaction that triggers the release of your assets back to your control.
So it's like sending a signal that says, give me back my stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that's good to know. Especially in the crypto world where things can be so unpredictable, it's good to have that safety net. Now, let's talk about another feature that I'm really interested in. The permissions engine.
Yes, the permissions engine.
We touched on it before, but I want to dig a little deeper. What are some of the things you can do with it?
So the permissions engine is all about giving you granular control over how your assets are used. Instead of just giving an app blanket permission to your tokens, you can set very specific rules and conditions.
Okay, so can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're using a decentralized exchange. You could allow it to automatically execute trades on your behalf, but only within certain price ranges.
Oh, that's smart.
Or you could set it up so that any transaction over a certain amount requires multiple confirmations.
So it's like having multiple layers of security.
Exactly. You're in control.
This has given me a lot more confidence in this whole one balance thing.
It's a game changer for security and peace of mind.
And I bet it opens up a lot of possibilities for automation too, right?
Oh, absolutely. You could set up a rule that automatically rebalances your portfolio based on market conditions. Or you could even delegate certain trading decisions to a bot that you trust.
So it's not just about security. It's about making Web3 smarter and more efficient.
Great. It's about putting you in the driver's seat.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the technical details and features of OneBalance, but I want to zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. This idea of a chain-free Web3 that they keep talking about.
Yeah, that's their ultimate vision.
What would that actually look like in practice?
Well, in a chain-free world, you wouldn't even have to think about what blockchain you're using. You could move your assets between chains, use any dApp, execute transactions, all without any of the complexity we see today.
It sounds too good to be true.
It's definitely ambitious.
So how far away are we from that?
It's hard to say for sure, but OneBalance is trying to lay the groundwork with their technology, their partnerships, and their overall approach.
So they're not just building a product, they're building a whole new way of thinking about Web3.
Exactly.
That's pretty exciting. But as with any emerging technology, there are still a lot of questions and challenges, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, will OneBalance actually be able to deliver on all these promises? Will live up to its potential?
Only time will tell. But they're definitely pushing the boundaries.
It's a project worth watching closely, that's for sure.
Okay.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into OneBalance.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical nitty-gritty to the grand vision of a chain-free future.
A lot to think about.
I know I've learned a lot.
So, to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep your eyes on the horizon. The future of Web3 is just getting started.